Welcome to the Deep Dive. It is great to have you sitting down with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Really glad you're here.
So, if you have ever been going about your day, just minding your own business, and your brain suddenly serves up a thought so entirely out of left field.
Just something completely random.
Right. Something so dark or upsetting that it actually stops you in your tracks, well, you are in exactly the right place.
You definitely are.
Today we are examining a really compelling piece of source material. It's a transcript from a YouTube video produced by the channel Bible Roots.
And the title is, If I'm Saved, Why Do I Think This? The War for Your Mind.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the complex, honestly, often misunderstood relationship between faith, mental health, and the, frankly, terrifying phenomena of intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic. But before we get into the actual mechanics of what this video discusses, we should probably establish the framework for how we're going to approach the material today.
Good idea. Let's set the stage.
The source we're analyzing is, well, as the title suggests, deeply rooted in Christian theology. Specifically, the concept of spiritual warfare.
Right, which, for those who might be unfamiliar with that term, spiritual warfare is essentially the belief that unseen spiritual forces are actively trying to disrupt a person's faith or their values or just their peace of mind.
Exactly. And for the purposes of this discussion, we are going to explore these concepts impartially.
Impartially, yes.
We are looking at them as really fascinating psychological and theological frameworks to understand how the speaker constructs this idea of a battle for the mind. We're not here to endorse the specific theological claims as absolute truth.
Not at all.
Instead, our goal is to examine how this perspective tackles human anxiety and the basic architecture of our thoughts, because honestly, the strategy it outlines is incredibly compelling, regardless of your personal worldview.
It really is. And the way the video opens, it establishes this visceral hook that I think almost anyone can relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
Picture this scenario for a second.
Yep.
You finally carve out a quiet minute in your day. You sit down to pray or maybe meditate.
Or just trying to center yourself.
Right, just seeking a tiny bit of silence in a very loud world. And suddenly, without any warning at all, a thought just screams in your mind.
Just shatters the silence.
Exactly. Maybe it's a massive existential doubt. Or perhaps it's something much darker. A thought that is, blasphemous, twisted, or so disturbing you're afraid to even admit to yourself that it just crossed your mind.
Yeah, and the speaker perfectly describes the immediate aftermath of that moment. The reaction is rarely just mild surprise.
No, it's terror.
It's pure terror. It's a spiraling heavy guilt and the immediate fear that your entire belief system is a fraud.
Because you assume that a quote-unquote good person wouldn't have a mind that produces that kind of imagery. Okay, let's unpack this. Why does the human brain immediately go into that kind of extreme tailspin over a single passing thought?
Well, that tailspin happens because of a failure to make a critical distinction. And this actually happens to be the foundational concept of the entire video.
The distinction between the presence of a thought and the permission of a thought. Right.
Exactly. The speaker argues that individuals fundamentally confuse the presence of a thought with the permission of a thought. When something dark enters the room of our mind, our immediate assumption is that we must have invited it in.
Like if it's in my head, I must want it there.
Right. The logic follows that if we invited it, we must secretly agree with it on some repressed subconscious level.
Which is a terrifying conclusion to jump to.
It is. But what makes this source material particularly rich is how it bridges that theological panic with established mental health concepts.
Yeah, I love this part.
The speaker acknowledges that within their religious framework, a sudden dark thought could certainly be categorized as a spiritual attack. But crucially, they place that right alongside modern psychological realities.
Right, noting that this exact same phenomenon could just be severe anxiety.
Or obsessive-compulsive disorder, specifically the kind that deals with intrusive thoughts.
Or trauma patterns.
Or simply what they label a noisy brain.
That dual acknowledgement really broadens the application of the video, I think. It kind of takes the pressure off the need to constantly identify the exact origin of the thought.
Which is a huge relief for a lot of people.
Definitely. The material suggests that it ultimately doesn't matter where the arrow came from, whether it was fired by an unseen spiritual enemy or just a misfiring neuron in a tired brain. The strategy for dealing with it remains exactly the same.
And this leads directly into a breakdown of two specific terms the speaker uses to categorize our thinking: inception versus injection.
Let's talk about inception first. The concept of inception is described as birthing an idea,
Right, something that comes from you.
organically growing out of your own genuine desires and conscious focus.
Whereas injection, on the other hand, is when an idea is planted by something else entirely.
It's forcefully pushed into your consciousness from the outside.
Recognizing the difference between those two mechanisms really alters the entire response protocol. In psychology, there's actually a term for these injected thoughts.
Ego-dystonic.
Ego-dystonic, yes. That means the thoughts are inconsistent with your fundamental beliefs, your self-image, and your desires,
They feel alien.
because they are alien to who you are. And the video uses this highly relatable modern analogy to illustrate this mechanism.
The laptop analogy.
Yeah, imagine your mind is like a laptop computer. You're sitting there browsing a completely normal, safe website,
Just reading an article or something.
and suddenly a highly graphic, inappropriate pop-up ad appears right in the middle of your screen.
You didn't search for it?
You certainly didn't click anything requesting it. It was pushed onto your monitor by an external code.
And when that happens on a laptop, the reaction is purely logistical. You don't suddenly feel a crushing wave of guilt.
You don't sit there staring at the screen thinking, you must be a fundamentally corrupted, twisted person just because that image appeared on your device.
Right. You recognize it as spam. You look for the little X in the corner, you close the window, and you move on with your afternoon without giving it a second thought.
What's fascinating here is the complete paradox in how we treat our digital spaces compared to our mental spaces.
It's so true.
We have zero problem dismissing digital pop-ups as external spam that has nothing to do with our moral character. We do not identify with the algorithm that targeted us.
But when a dark mental pop-up occurs, an ego-dystonic intrusive thought, we abandon all of that logic.
We freeze.
We examine the thought from every conceivable angle. We take ownership of the spam, immediately assuming the computer itself, our moral core, is broken and corrupted.
To counter that tendency to take ownership of the spam, the source material reaches back into history. They pull a quote from the 16th century reformer Martin Luther.
Oh, I love this quote. You cannot stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop it from building a nest in your hair.
It's a brilliant visual.
It really is. The sudden injection of the thought, the pop-up ad, is just the bird. It's random noise flying through your airspace.
And the reality of being a human being with a complex nervous system is that you simply cannot control the airspace entirely.
You just can't. The actual issue or the sin in the theological context of the video would be letting that bird build a nest.
It's the act of agreeing with the thought, pulling up a chair for it and making a home for it in your mind.
And that concept of guarding the airspace connects to another primary analogy the speaker uses, which is the idea of the empty house.
Right, the empty house. The premise here is straightforward. Thieves do not waste their time breaking into empty houses.
That makes sense.
A master burglar is not going to spend hours picking the intricate lock of a rundown shack that contains absolutely nothing of value.
They target the vault.
Exactly. They focus their efforts on the place where the treasure is actually kept.
And for the audience watching the video, this seems to be the major turning point of the entire presentation. It completely flips the script on the terror they're feeling.
It really does.
If you are experiencing stomach-turning repulsion at a dark thought, the video argues that this severe emotional reaction is actually proof of your underlying commitment to your values.
Because if you were genuinely a bad person, or if your faith was entirely fake, a twisted thought wouldn't bother you.
You wouldn't feel sick, you'd just shrug and keep going.
The repulsion itself is framed as evidence of the Holy Spirit, or your deepest moral convictions standing guard.
The very fact that you hate the thought is the ultimate proof of what you actually value.
It's a massive cognitive reframe. It takes the exact symptom causing the anxiety, the severe emotional disgust at the thought, and transforms it into a source of profound reassurance.
You aren't reacting because you are evil.
You're reacting because the thought is utterly foreign to your true nature. So once this framework is established and a person realizes they are dealing with an injection, a random bird, or a thief at the door, the video shifts gears.
Right, it moves from diagnosis to strategy.
Yeah.
How does someone actually fight back against this phenomena?
And the battle plan outlined in the video pulls heavily from the writings of the Apostle Paul, specifically the famous passage in Ephesians 6 regarding the armor of God.
But the speaker zeroes in on one highly specific piece of that armor, the helmet of salvation.
The helmet, yes.
The question posed to the viewer is why Paul specifically chose a helmet to represent salvation. Why not the boots of salvation, or the belt, or the breastplate.
It highlights a strategic reality of combat. In almost any form of conflict, the head is the primary target.
That's true.
Within the theological framework of this video, the enemy's goal with an intrusive thought isn't just to make the believer feel uncomfortable or gross for a few minutes. The strategic objective is to make them take off the helmet entirely.
The goal is to fracture their foundational assurance.
Exactly. If a person looks at an intrusive thought, spirals into panic, and concludes that they must not really be saved or that their faith is a sham, the enemy has successfully won the engagement.
If you can get a believer to doubt their fundamental salvation, to voluntarily unbuckle that helmet, they are taken out of the fight entirely.
They become neutralized by their own internal doubt, and the spiritual enemy never even had to touch their actual heart to accomplish it.
This strategic view of the mind leads into another reference from Paul, this time from 2 Corinthians 10, where the text explicitly instructs believers to take captive every thought.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the specific vocabulary used in that ancient text is incredibly revealing.
The word captive.
Right. The instruction is to take thoughts captive. You do not take your friends captive. You do not take your family captive.
You take enemies captive.
By using that specific terminology, the text is acknowledging a fundamental, unavoidable reality. There will be hostile intruders in your mind.
Experiencing a hostile thought entering your consciousness is not a sign that your faith has failed.
Nor is it a sign of weakness. It is presented as an entirely expected part of both the human and the spiritual experience.
So the presence of intruders is normalized. The core question the video then attempts to answer is how to handle those intruders when they inevitably show up.
Which brings up what the speaker identifies as a massive tactical error that many people make: the trap of rumination.
Oh, this is a big one.
The very first step of their proposed battle plan is to completely stop negotiating with the intrusive thought.
It is so easy to fall into that awful circular debate. A thought pops up and says, "You aren't really saved. You are a complete fraud."
And instead of treating it like the digital spam we discussed earlier, the natural human instinct is to argue with it using feelings.
You try to defend yourself. A person might mentally respond, "Yes, I am. I feel like I am. Please just go away."
And the intrusive thought simply pivots, responding with, "Oh, really? Well, remember that terrible mistake you made 5 years ago? Remember what you just thought 2 seconds ago?"
And before you know it, you are trapped in a paralyzing spiral.
The psychology of rumination perfectly aligns with what the speaker is warning against here. When you try to defeat an irrational lie by heavily analyzing it, you are actually just giving it more oxygen.
Your brain thinks it is solving a problem.
But debating a lie with your emotions isn't fighting, it's just ruminating. The strategy the video puts forward is that you cannot debate the lie, you must displace it.
Displace it. The speaker cites the historical example of David in Psalm 42.
Yes, when David was experiencing deep despair and mental anguish, he didn't just sit there and let his mind run wild.
He didn't try to reason gently with his sadness either. He actually spoke directly to his mind. He says, "Why are you cast down, O my soul?"
He preached to his own internal state. He displaced the emotional spiral with a firm, authoritative declaration.
Rather than engaging in a debate with shifting emotions, the video suggests arguing with a stagnant source of truth.
And the speaker brings up Romans 8.1 for this, a verse that states, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus."
To explain how this applies to intrusive thoughts, they use a courtroom analogy.
Imagine a formal courtroom setting. The judge strikes the gavel and reads the final verdict into the record.
That verdict is legally true and binding, regardless of what the defendant sitting at the table is doing.
Exactly. The defendant could be crying their eyes out, they could be smiling, or they could be having a full-blown panic attack.
The emotional state of the defendant has absolutely zero bearing on the reality of the judge's ruling.
The point the video makes to its audience is that they do not need to feel the truth of their salvation for it to remain true.
The verdict is secure. And that courtroom analogy leads perfectly into the final major paradigm shift of the source material,
which involves entirely redefining the concept of peace.
The speaker identifies what they call the biggest trap of modern Christianity, the tendency to turn faith into a mood.
There is a pervasive modern assumption, often fueled by how mindfulness and spirituality are marketed today, that if your mind is racing, or if you lack a warm, fuzzy feeling of internal tranquility, it must mean that God has abandoned you.
Or that you are fundamentally broken. Carrying the expectation that a good spiritual life equals a perpetually quiet mind is an incredibly heavy burden.
It is an impossible standard. To dismantle that burden, the speaker synthesizes their argument using a famous biblical narrative.
The story of Jesus and the disciples in the boat.
Right. As the narrative goes, they are in the middle of a sea when a massive storm hits. Waves are crashing over the sides of the boat, the situation is totally chaotic, and the disciples are absolutely terrified that they are going to drown.
And where is Jesus during all this chaos?
He is asleep on a cushion in the back of the boat.
The profound lesson the speaker extracts from this text is that the presence of the storm does not equal the absence of God.
What stands out about how the speaker phrases this to their audience is the profound reassurance it provides. They make the point that within this belief system, the divine is not demanding a mind with perfect, glass-like clarity.
A mind that never experiences a single bad thought.
The message to the viewer is that salvation, or ultimate security, is held together by the divine's ability to save, not the individual's ability to maintain unbroken focus.
The analogy implies that the divine presence is right there in the boat with them, fully aware of their human frame and fragile nervous system, even in the middle of a panic attack.
And that realization is designed to completely change the power dynamic for the individual.
It takes the pressure off.
It shifts peace from being an elusive, transient emotion that you have to somehow chemically conjure up into a firm, objective position that you simply occupy, regardless of the weather.
That shift in perspective is what brings the video to its passionate call to action at the end.
The speaker challenges their audience to draw a line in the sand and make a definitive declaration.
They urge the viewer to treat peace as a hard decision rather than a fleeting feeling.
The call to action is to reclaim the mind as territory that belongs to their faith, and to literally declare to the intrusive noise, "Not today."
Not today. The idea is to accept that the noise might exist, but to refuse to let it dictate the state of the soul.
It's an approach designed to be incredibly empowering for someone feeling trapped by their own thoughts. It restores agency to the individual.
It removes them from the passive role of being a helpless victim to their own neurology or perceived spiritual attacks, and places them into the active role of a defender.
A defender who knows their foundational standing is secure, totally independent of the temporary, chaotic weather patterns moving through their mind.
Wow, we have covered a significant amount of complex ground today. Let's do a quick recap of the critical takeaways we extracted from this source material.
Let's do it.
First, there is the vital importance of identifying the difference between the inception of a thought, an idea you actually desire and create, and the injection of a thought, the mental pop-up ad that simply appears uninvited.
Second, if a dark thought causes you severe repulsion, that repulsion is presented as proof that your core values are fully intact. It is the guard dog doing its job.
Third, the strategy requires refusing to negotiate with the noise. It means stopping the circular emotional debates and instead displacing the lie with an authoritative truth.
And finally, the storm in your mind does not mean you are abandoned. The presence of the storm does not mean the absence of security.
So what does this all mean?
It leaves us with a really fascinating philosophical implication to consider.
I'd love to hear it.
The speaker in the video argues that your severe repulsion to dark thoughts is the ultimate proof of your underlying devotion. But it makes you wonder, if our deepest, most authentic values are often revealed by the very things our minds instinctively and violently rebel against, could it be that the messy, chaotic, and sometimes dark noise of human consciousness isn't actually a flaw in our design?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Could that very friction be the exact mechanism required to forge genuine, unshakable conviction?
That is definitely a profound question to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. A huge thank you to you for joining us on this exploration. We hope it brought you some clarity, a new perspective on the architecture of your thoughts, and a different way to look at the battlefield of the mind. Keep asking the hard questions. Keep giving yourself some grace. We will catch you on the next deep dive.